Hello and welcome to my Yu-Gi-Oh channel. Today we're looking at some brand new cards which are being released from the Jump Festa information, and these are taking some of the most iconic scenes within each series of Yu-Gi-Oh and making those into field spell cards. The first is Duel Tower Alcatraz. This is a field spell with the effect, at the start of the battle phase, activate this effect. Each player can reveal one monster from their deck, except a monster with question mark attack, and if they do, banish those monsters face down. The player that revealed the monster with the highest attack can special summon one monster from their hand, and if they do, it can attack directly. 2. Once per turn, during the end phase, you can activate this effect. If this card is still on the field during the end phase of your next turn, destroy all cards on the field. This is meant to be the Duel Tower from the Battle City tournament, where I believe it was Marek, Ishtar, Joey Wheeler, Seto Kaiba and Yugi Moto dueling, and they were in these big kind of games simulations where they were in, whenever someone would lose life points, they would actually be boosted up the tower, and whomever was, boosted up there first would duel first, and that was how it worked. The effect it has at the start of the battle phase to just, for each player to banish monsters face down is fine, because actually the higher the monster you sacrifice, the more likely you are to be able to special summon a monster from your hand. The only problem with doing that is you are banishing some of your strongest pieces. If you do that, then you might have the guarantee in one way, but you've got limited forms of recovery, especially since the monsters are banished face down. That's usually a more permanent way of banishing monsters these days. It does also provide the monster that you special summon with the opportunity to attack directly. That's fine, depending on how you are within the duel, you might be able to win with that effect, but it also works in reverse. If your opponent has the higher monster, and if you're not running a massive load of strong attack monsters and your opponent has a couple of those, they can just get rid of one of theirs for one of their better monsters as well, and guarantee that they actually beat you with that effect. The second effect is actually a quite unusual one, because it just destroys everything on the field. It does have to work during the end phase of your next turn, so even when you're using it, you have to have the foresight to think, oh, this is what my opponent is planning to do next turn, and depending on what style of deck they have, they might have something that can be protected from being destroyed. If they go into that, then this card becomes quite useless and almost self-detonates your own cards. It's a bit like when you're running in Pokemon, something like a Weezing, and you use Explosion. Yes, you can protect your monsters with Protect, but your opponent can also do the same, and then you might end up losing your own monsters and your own cards rather than, actually targeting your opponent. It's decent, but since you have to make that aware that you're using that effect, your opponent's going to do something to this card before it ever gets to trigger. Now we welcome you to Duel Academy. It's a field spell with the effect, this card gains these effects based on the types of monsters on the field. Warrior, Beast or Pyro. Once per turn, if you activate a trap card, you can target one card your opponent controls, destroy it. Dinosaur, Sea Serpent or Thunder. Once per turn, if you activate a spell card, you can inflict 1000 damage to your opponent. And Machine, Fairy or Fiends. Once per turn, if you activate a monster effect, you can target one face-up monster you control. It gains 1000 attack points. This is quite an unusual combination of monsters in any sense of the word. I know certain characters did run a combination of these cards, so I can understand that. For example, Warriors was Jaden. I don't remember anyone using Beasts. There might be one or two out there. It was Chumley Huffington. He was the Beast style of duelist. Pyro, you've got Axel Brody, so in terms of effects, if you activate a trap, you get to just destroy any card your opponent controls. That's decent, but depends on the style of trap you're running. If it's something that you can activate at any point, that's very useful, because you can control when you're destroying your opponent's cards. If you don't happen to have one of those time-based trap cards and it has to be activated at specific times, it might not give you the benefits that you want. In terms of the second effect, Dinosaurs, Sea Serpents and Thunders. Dinosaurs were used by Tyranno Hasselbury. They were also, they weren't used by Jim Cook, because he was running rock style support, even though some of it was themed based on dinosaur types. Sea Serpents, I don't think anyone was using. It wasn't a type of strategy that was relied upon. Maybe at most you could argue Bastion used it once against Chaz Princeton, and that was against a Dorm demotion / promotion for Bastion, and Thunder's, I think, was also partly used by Bastion, but other than that I can't remember anyone else using them. The spell, if you activate a spell card, you inflict 1,000 points of damage to the opponent. Very simple, very easy to use effect, not a problem. It's definitely something you want to be relying upon, as you can activate it at multiple times whenever you feel like. Even though it is a once per turn effect, 1,000 points of damage isn't bad. As for machines, fairies and fiends, machines were used by Chaz Princeton. He had the XYZ dragon cannons. I believe in terms of fairies, I'm not sure of any character that used fairies, and in terms of fiends, you might have had, I know the dark form of Jane as the Supreme King, a lot of his monsters were fiends, so that's where that applies. And if you activate a monster effect, you're just able to boost your monster's attack points by 1,000. Decent effect, and it can be activated at any point, really, considering that you'll have monster effects that can trigger more regularly than, say, trap cards. Ready Set Duel is obviously from Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds when they're facing off in Turbo Duels. It's a continuous spell card. With the effect, you can only activate one card with this card's name per turn. 1. When this card resolves, if you control no other cards, you can add one synchron monster from your deck to your hand. 2. Once per turn during your standby phase, you can place one signal counter on this card. And 3. You can remove 2 signal counters from your field and send this face-up card to the graveyard to draw 2 cards, then send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard. In terms of effects, this is okay. First one, to be able to just search for a synchron monster, is meant to be relying on a Yusei style of deck. Second effect is just to generate these signal counters, and it's during each of your standby phases. It's not that you have to complete any specific task, which I'd argue is actually quite okay. And the third effect just lets you draw 2 additional cards, and then you have to discard 1. So you're not getting any pluses off that, but you're not minusing yourself either. In this case, you might be able to swap out into 2 additional cards that will extend your strategy and make things easier. Overlay Network is for Yu-Gi-Oh! Zeal, and that's to do with Xyz summoning. It's a continuous spell with the effect. You can only use the first effect of this card's name once per turn. 1. During your main phase, you can activate one of these effects. Target one face-up monster you control that has a level. Special summon one monster with the same level from your hand or graveyard in defense position. Its effects are negated. You cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck during the turn you activate this effect, except Xyz monsters. Or target one Xyz monster you control. Add 1 card attached to it to that card owner's hand. The first effect just lets you Xyz summon much easier because you're able to then summon a monster with the same level. That's its intended purpose. My only concern with that is it's quite restrictive based on your extra deck. If you don't have a wide variety, then this is a little bit useless. And it also means that you do need to have the relevant cards already either in the hand or set up in the graveyard. The second effect being to actually detach the material to add back to the hand can be useful if it has its own effects that are quite useful in comparison to the Xyz monster, where it might have a very simplistic effect, or one that just means that has a lot of attack points but nothing really to back itself up. So for example, Gemnite Pearl is essentially a normal vanilla Xyz monster. It never uses its Xyz materials. It's better to actually recover those cards and then perhaps go into further Xyz summons. Battle Royale mode joining is from Arc 5. It's a continuous spell card with the effect activate this card by targeting one effect monster on the field. 1. The first 2 times that target would be destroyed by battle each turn, it is not destroyed. When that target is destroyed by battle, the player that destroyed it gains 2,000 life points. And 2. If the turn player's opponent takes battle or effect damage, they can apply this effect. Special summon 1 level 4 or lower monster from your hand or deck, and if you do, you lose 2,000 life points. The first effect of this is actually meant to be a form of protection. I do believe there are a couple of cards that do have this similar kind of effect. Even if you look at things such as Shield Wing, which is from Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, it can protect itself twice from being destroyed in battle, and actually, when it is destroyed, you do get the reward of 2,000 life points. The secondary ability, it's meant to be if the turn player's opponent takes any damage, then they have the ability to then add to their field presence by special summoning a level 4 or lower monster from the hand or deck. It's nice that it's from the deck as well, because that gives you more options, and in exchange you lose 2,000 life points. The idea of this was whenever characters within Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 would randomly join in Royal Battle mode, they would end up getting 2,000 life points taken from their score if they joined the duel after it had progressed and started. And the final card is Into the Brains. That's obviously for Yu-Gi-Oh! Brains. It's a normal spell card with the effect you can only activate one card with this card's name per turn. One, special summon one monster from your hand, but its effects are negated. Then immediately after this effect resolves, link summon using that monster you control. This link summon cannot be negated. Also, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects when a monster is link summoned this way. 2. If a link monster you control is destroyed by battle or card effect while this card is in your graveyard, you can banish this card, add one monster with the same original type as that monster from your graveyard to your hand. So the purpose of the first effect, to be able to special summon a monster from the hand, just lets you go into a link summon immediately. That means your opponent cannot react to it, or the link summon of a link monster formed from that combination. That provides at least some protection from being solemned, from bottomless trap hole, any form of disruption, at least letting it sit on the field and use its effects. Secondary ability, if the link monster you control is destroyed by battle or card effect, whilst this is in the graveyard, just by banishing this card, you're able to then search for and recover a monster with the same type as that from the graveyard to the hand. That just helps to revive some form of advantage. The reason they didn't actually introduce a Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush Duels card in this, I think, is purely because it's a different format and it wouldn't fit necessarily within all of the others, the traditional types of series. That's why I think they avoided going with Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s. I like the design of all of these cards, and I love the fact they are actually looking to design cards based on some of the stadiums and the fields and the events that happen within Yu-Gi-Oh! I think most of these do have some benefit, even if they're not specific to, for example, you would have expected for the Duel Academy to maybe support fusion monsters or elemental heroes, and they're generic enough to be splashed within a lot more decks than just your standard defined cards within that series. Whatever you guys think of these cards, please put those in the comments down below, and make sure to watch the end screen video to help support my channel. Thank you.